Good morning. I am Elissa Silverman, at-large council member and chair of the Committee on Labor and Workforce Development. Today is Wednesday, December 9th, and the time is now 9:30. My apologies to everyone. I had computer issues this morning, first time in the pandemic, and lost a significant amount of work, but we will continue on. So I am convening this oversight roundtable regarding unemployment insurance programs in the district during the COVID-19 pandemic. So one of the things I lost this morning is some of the responses that I try to do every morning to workers in our city who write to me because they do not receive their unemployment benefits or having to understand the issues regarding their benefit and why they're not getting paid. I will tell you that nearly every morning for the last 9 months, there have been multiple messages in my inbox from DC workers asking me to help them with their unemployment benefits. As we all know, the coronavirus pandemic is not simply a public health emergency, but it's an economic crisis for our city that's been uneven, honestly. Our businesses and their workers, particularly in the restaurant, hotel, convention, and retail industries, have simply been clobbered by the pandemic. This has caused massive layoffs in these industries, and nearly 160,000 workers in our city have filed for unemployment claims to get the financial assistance to just keep them afloat and keep their families afloat right now. Now, this is a scale, 160,000 workers in less than a year is a scale no one anticipated, but we need as a city to meet the challenge. The unemployment system is supposed to be the safety net that is there for workers who lose a job through no fault of their own, and that is certainly the situation we are in right now. But far too many workers are falling through the cracks and are not getting their benefits, and this is because unemployment is a federal system that is administered through the states. It's complicated, but we have talked about this at other oversight hearings, but we need to make the program understandable for our claimants so that they know what to do, so that they can access this critical lifeline or these critical lifelines, because we've created an additional program for non-traditional workers who traditionally don't receive unemployment, the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program that I'm going to talk about in a minute. But I have to say that I know that our workers in our Department of Employment Services are working very hard, but we need to make these programs understandable, particularly now that people are in long-term unemployment. I'm still hearing from workers who've been on the phone for hours, who've called 20 times, and they still don't have their benefit and they still don't know what's going on. So even though we have been in this pandemic 9 months, we're all exhausted. We need to help these workers because it not only helps them and their children and their families, but it helps our city. This is part of the solution to get our economy back up and running. So today we're going to hear from, I believe, 10 witnesses about some of the problems that are still plaguing our UI claimants. And I will say a focus today, I think, is going to be on extensions. Many of our workers are now in long-term unemployment, which means if you're in the traditional UI program, you're a W-2 worker, or we're a W-2 worker, you have exhausted your initial 26 weeks of benefits. And if you are in the new program created for those who previously were ineligible for unemployment, I'm talking about our gig workers, our independent contractors, and you receive pandemic unemployment assistance, you might be hitting or nearing the 39 weeks of benefits. You qualify for the extension programs, but they are confusing. And so I just want to take a moment to explain them. So if you are a traditional unemployment claimant, you receive UI and you've exhausted your 26 weeks, you are eligible for an extension called Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation, PEUC. You need to apply for it. And many of our claimants have run into issues. One of the biggest issues that I have heard from our claimants time and again, and I have a bunch of emails in my Outlook inbox right now, are workers who in our city who work in multiple states. So you're a bartender who works one job in DC and one job in Silver Spring, Maryland. So you have wages in both states. Many of our claimants who have wages in more than one state have run into issues with PEUC. And we're going to talk about this more in the public witness part of our hearing, but basically it is confusing because when you exhaust your claim in DC and you have wages in another state, you have to determine whether you're eligible for unemployment in that other state. As I said, we're going to talk about this more, but it is extremely confusing and we need to give better guidance to our claimants. And that's something I'm going to work on and I'm going to talk to the Department of Employment Services about. But let's continue with the extensions for a moment. So PEUC, which is a federally funded program created out of the pandemic and the CARES Act, is 13 weeks. So what happens if you run out of your 13 weeks of PEUC? Well, then you're eligible for another extension program, which is called extended benefits. That makes sense, right? This was initially a 13-week program, and you might have read or heard from our last hearing that the council, working in coordination with DOES and the Department of Labor, has turned on a second part of that program, which adds another 7 weeks when we are in periods of high unemployment, which we certainly are now, and a period in which the federal government would pay for those benefits, which we are in now. And that's the other thing I want to talk about and pause on for a second. You've heard this, I'm sure, from many people across the country. We need Congress to stop dithering, and we need Congress to help our workers in the district and across this country by passing a new bill to address unemployment. You might have read in the paper, I think it's in the paper today, there's a proposal to renew the $600 supplemental benefit with unemployment. We cannot do this alone on the city and state level. We need federal money and we need it now. We need another stimulus package. But until either Congress or I'm very hopeful about the incoming Biden administration's economic plans, but until then, we're going to need to rely on ourselves. And that's tough because we can't deficit spend like the federal government. We have to balance our budget. But I was very happy to hear on Monday when Mayor Bowser announced the district's own, she called it a stimulus, but it's a supplemental payment to some of our DC unemployed workers who live in the district. So for those workers who are claimants and receive pandemic unemployment assistance, so you are the contractors, gig workers, newly hired workers who receive PUA and you live in the district and you have been eligible for PUA as of the end of November, DC is going to give you a one-time stimulus payment of $1,200. And I know that, and this is a life preserver, I know for many of you who have only received the initial $179 a week and have not had either a monetary redetermination of your wage replacement or back pay. Now, those who watch our hearings know that PUA and the many claims that have not received the monetary redetermination and back pay was a major focus, both of our public witnesses as well as of committee questioning during the hearing. And I know that DOES Director Unique Morris Hughes was thinking a lot about PUA, and I'm glad that the administration has decided to address this. It is part of the solution. It's not the full solution. Obviously, we need help again from our federal partners, because the other issue that is looming is that the CARES Act money, so this was the stimulus package that was passed by Congress, I think back in maybe late March or early April, the money for those programs that were created like PUA is ending at the end of December. So if Congress does not take action, then we are going to see PUA and some of the federally funded extension programs like PUC go away. And that would be devastating, not only for workers in our city, but across the country. So I hope that does not happen. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about today. So we are going to hear from 10 witnesses, and then I had hoped that the committee would hear directly today from the director of the Department of Employment Services, Dr. Unique Morris Hughes, who last appeared before the committee in September. I talked to Director Morris Hughes, and because of the stimulus announcement, obviously it's a very busy week at DOES to get this ready. So we are working with the director, and I am very hopeful that we are going to find a time next week for the director to appear before the committee to talk about first the stimulus, how it's going to work, who is eligible, and talk a bit more about the timing of those dollars. So that's a very good thing, and that the agency will talk about. Second, about extended benefits. A lot of claimants, including many people who've emailed me and called our office, have asked, when are we turning on that extra 7 weeks? I am hopeful that Director Morris Hughes will have a updated timeline for us on that. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit more about the extensions and issues with PEUC and extended benefits. So I look forward to having that discussion with her, as well as, and I hope this isn't where we're headed, but if the federal programs run out, what does that mean for our workers? But I do want to focus on another piece of progress before we begin with our public witnesses, and that is the modernization of the unemployment insurance claimant portal. As many of you know, we have an outdated system that we have funded to make more user-friendly and modernize. It is certainly in need of an overhaul. DOES has had funding to develop a new portal, and now the work is getting started. Last month, the agency called for bids to actually build this new portal, and the legislation passed by the council this year in the budget requires that the new portal be launched by September 30th, 2022. So I think that's been a lot from me. I want to say a few more things before we begin, which is that if you are watching either in right now or you're watching a rebroadcast of this hearing, you can submit testimony to the committee in writing. You can do that by emailing labor@dccouncil.us before Wednesday, December 23rd at 5 p.m. So get your Christmas shopping done, submit your testimony, you'll be all set for Christmas. Or you can call and leave a voicemail telling us what you want to be included in the hearing record, and we will transcribe it. So that number to call is 202-455-0153. Let me give that one more time. It's 202-455-0153. And remember to speak slowly, and please spell your name for us so that we will have it correct in the hearing record. I do not see any other members from the committee have joined us, so we are going to move to our public witnesses. Our first panel is going to consist of Caitlin Schiavone, Zachary Hoffman, who is Executive Vice President, DC Bar and Restaurant Workers Alliance, Andrew Shapiro, who is owner president of KMB Sodas, and Monica Stempo, who I believe has already joined us. So I will give a moment for our public witnesses to assemble. And Ms. Stempo, if you want to turn your camera on for us. Terrific. Well, do we have Ms. Schiavone here? Okay. Is Jamal Washington here? Okay. Ashley Young. Ms. Young, I see you've joined us. You'll be the fourth member of our panel. So why don't we begin this morning with Mr. Hoffman. Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Ms. Young and Ms. Stempo, I'm just going to ask you guys to turn your speakers off. Thank you so much. Mr. Hoffman, you'll kick us off. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you, council members and committee staff, for allowing me to speak with you today. My name is Zachary Hoffman, and this morning I'm speaking on behalf of the DC Bar and Restaurant Workers Alliance. We are an inclusive, worker-driven platform providing protection, empowerment, advocacy, and tangible services to the bar and restaurant workforce. I serve as the Executive Vice President for this organization, and my testimony today will reflect the opinions of my organization and its members. I want to first thank Councilmember Silverman for holding this roundtable discussion. It is my hope that our dialogue today will help spur much needed changes and increase accessibility to the UI programs active in DC during this pandemic. There's been significant difficulty amongst the bar and restaurant workforce in accessing critical benefits, including UI, PEUC, PUA, and EB. This is now the third time I'm publicly bringing these concerns to the committee, with little to no changes felt by one of the hardest hit communities in the district. For months, workers have faced obstacle after obstacle when trying to access UI. Traditional unemployment claimants are still today waiting on back payments. PEUC has proven to be a minefield of red tape and holdups, and there's little faith that EB will be without these same issues. DCBRWA has been inundated with requests for help figuring out how to get benefits to those who are attempting to file claims. There's been little to no outreach from DOES, and workers are still facing long hold times, unanswered emails when trying to fix their claims. Workers have been asking for help outside of DOES through the Office of Nightlife and Culture, including others, and still have difficulties getting their claims adjusted properly that you council members say you're aware of and getting copied on the emails. Throughout the unemployment crisis, we've heard from several organizations and individuals in these hearings about common sense approaches to help improve UI and the accessibility of these benefits. However, it appears that DOES has not been willing or able to make these necessary changes. This committee must be more proactive in overseeing the administration of UI programs because the workers are asking for help and they need it. Attached to my testimony today, and I have sent this to your staff, council member, are 2 correspondence letters from the Department of Labor that I believe underscore not only the need to get claims benefits paid, but the legal requirement DOES is held to. Many workers are going weeks without benefits, being told to wait until their claims are processed. There exists a limit on how long an individual can wait for their benefits, not to mention the legal protections that exist to ensure timely delivery of those payments. You'll see I have a section here referencing one of those letters. In Section 303A1 of the Social Security Act requires states as a condition of receiving federal UC administration grants to provide in their laws for such methods of administration are found in the Secretary of Labor to be reasonable, calculated to ensure full payments of unemployment compensation when due. In the 1971 decision, California Department of Human Resources Development versus Java, the Supreme Court interpreted when due in Section 303A1 of the Social Security Act to mean at the earliest stage of an unemployment that such payments are administratively feasible after giving both the worker and employer an opportunity to be heard. The delays and massive backlog of claims are not only hindering workers' ability to survive during a pandemic, but the case can also be made that a failure to uphold legally mandated requirements from the Department of Labor are in breach. I am asking this committee to do everything in its power to support DOES and enable its ability to get claims processed and increase communication with claimants. The top priority must be the support of bar and restaurant workers who are dependent on the critical services and deserving of a fair and timely response to their claims. Thank you, and I am available for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman. Mr. Shapiro. Welcome again to the council.
Good morning. Thank you, committee, and thank you, Councilmember Silverman. I'm not in a great place for a video, so I hope that's okay. But I do want to thank you all for holding another roundtable to discuss the challenges faced by many. I think Mr. Hoffman echoed a lot of the frustration that I've also been hearing from the workforce I'm a part of, which is the hospitality, bar, and restaurant industry. Personally, for me, my experiences on unemployment have not been frustrating at all. I have pretty seamlessly transitioned to the different programs, but I do follow, what a lot of other workers are experiencing, and on a daily basis, find myself answering questions. And again, I want to talk just a little bit about where I think, there could be some improvements in the communication, particularly as it relates to how people are getting information, what sorts of information they're getting, et cetera. So I know this has been brought up before, but I know there was an effort made to reduce waste in paper, and I assume expenses by not sending out the paper copies of the tax return. I think as we get to this time of the year, it's vitally important. I opted back in to receive those, and I've not received those. There's a lot of critical information on that, and I think people really need to have access to know where they're at with weeks, where they're at with benefits, and particularly as we get close to the end of the year and people have to start thinking about taxes, because people will have to file taxes on this, and I assume a lot of people probably haven't opted to have taxes removed and things like that. So I don't know what sort of effort is being made to get that information out, but I would certainly hope that has not been lost in the discussion of everything else, because those weekly forms were really critical, again, for so many people to just get basic information about their account, what money they had eligible and where they were on the weeks. So I wanted to bring that back to the committee's attention so that that was not lost in the scuffle of everything. I actually did find an incredibly useful newsletter that I don't think is weekly, but I have received a couple of times from the DOES, which has lots of information. I really had to go out of my way to find it on their website. But the 2 times that I received it, it had a ton of useful information. I know, through my campaign work in the DC Council race, I was really lucky to get to spend a lot of time getting to know a lot of the government websites and discovering how many useful newsletters and resources and things there are. And one of the things that's been most troubling to me is it's you really have to dig to find that information. And DC has a lot of really helpful programs, particularly at this moment for workers of all varieties. And I think, another thing that I would really like to stress is, the digital communication as far as like email newsletters and things like that. You're emphasizing people getting access to those because there is a lot of information in those. And I think a lot of the questions that people are emailing and they're waiting on hold for can be answered in that stuff. So I wanted to stress again, just the need to make sure that that information is getting out to people and that we have access, people know that they have access to these, really useful, comprehensive overviews of the policies and the programs. And the third thing that I wanted to address, I really appreciate the administration finding money in the CARES Act that we were allotted to help the PUAC workers. I know a lot of contract workers that have really been struggling, and they don't get talked about a lot because they kind of fit in the margins. What I wanted to know was there any talk? I guess. Okay.
You have
My
another
time up,
minute.
or-
Nope, you have another minute. Mr. Shapiro.
So much of everything is based on federal guidance and allowance. Has there been any discussion of creating some local programs beyond this, given the unique challenges faced by our city and the overwhelming amount of hospitality workers and 1099 workers to bear in mind? I would hope that one of the things that this has brought to attention is how many kind of non-traditional workers there are and how little help there was for them in so many avenues. So again, thank you for your time. I hope that the communication things are continued to be discussed and they do not get lost in the shuffle of everything. And we continue to work to make sure people have access to what they need to know about the programs and their filings.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Shapiro. Ms. Stumpo. Well, hi, how are you? Welcome to the council.
No, there. Hi, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. You can begin your testimony.
Okay. So I was a bartender at El Techo in DC, but so when the pandemic closed I'm just going to kind of relate my own personal experience with the whole unemployment system, just kind of how it's been since the beginning.
I'll give you 5 minutes to do that. We have a clock. We're going to start it now.
I hopefully it won't take about 5 minutes, but let's see how I can do this. Okay, so when the order came out for the restaurants to close, obviously I lost my position, was misinformed where to file, so I filed in Virginia where I lived. Then within a week received information from Virginia that that's not where to file, so then I filed within DC. And then I waited until the end of May, so about 2.5 months, with constantly going on to different sort of webinars and sending email addresses to any email that is on the OES website, any phone number, just daily calls, daily hours to get anything moving. Sometime in May, there was, and it was basically like that I was approved, but I wasn't approved for any money. So then they had to approve the money and it kept dragging out. So then when it did happen, when in May, they finally did, like last week of May, it was approved. The back pay, which I was supposed to receive till at least when I filed in DC, I only received for the weeks of May. Interestingly enough, this morning, DOES called me as I was scheduled to testify here with some weeks of my back pay from April that they're like, oh, we hear you need back pay, so here, we're going to give it to you now. So, I mean, that's like, I'm very happy that I'm going to get money that was due to me 5 months ago. But, I do think that the fact that I was testifying today was the driving reason behind that. And that's definitely not the situation for most of the people within my industry or in general who are unemployed at the moment. And then other than that, once it went through, it was pretty seamless with my claims and going on forward. When unemployment ran out, I had been, I guess there was a little bit of an issue with my transition to the PEUC again, because the information wasn't clear that I still had to actually be claiming unemployment the same way. I filed it and was expecting someone to be like, you have been approved, or some sort of information about what my next steps were supposed to be. So then once I reached out again to every single email on DOES, someone came back to me saying that I need to file for these weeks ASAP, and things moved into the PEOC part of the unemployment compensation. However, it is significantly less than even my unemployment is normally. So, you know, that was kind of a bummer that I was going to be making or getting less than I was getting on unemployment already without the additional federal funding, which, you know, is kind of hard to live on $200 a week. So that's kind of where I'm now in my personal struggle. And I've tried to help as many people who I could have helped try to navigate the system, because once I got through, so many people, like you know, can't, you know, so many people I work with were having trouble navigating the system with even just getting through on phone calls, or then writing emails to people so that someone can take up their case. So I spent some time trying to help other people communicate with DOES, even if it was just because of their language level skills, like they couldn't write in English to what their situation was or what they needed, or even in any other language. So that's just kind of, you know, the process of how to get the claims is confusing for people who even, you know, navigate within an electronically, technologically forward world. It's very difficult to actually understand what the steps and process are. So I think just in some way of streamlining the process, and anyone who's worked within agents, or, you know, any sort of industry that got shut down on March 15th, there really shouldn't have been any reason. It was a complicated process to prove that you lost your work. It was obviously that you lost your work. The place, everything was shut down. So kind of just making the whole process simple so that we as workers understand what to do and do it as quickly as possible. But, you know, that being said, any communication I actually got.
We have just lost your audio, Ms. Stempo. If you want to turn your audio back on.
Once they were coming through. Sorry, and things at once.
That's okay. Well, the timing is such that is 5 minutes. I am going to have some questions for you because I think you're one of our prototypical examples. So thank you for your testimony, and I will have some questions. Ms. Young, welcome to the council. And if I see you've turned your audio on and your video on. Good morning. Yeah. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Well, listening to everyone's testimonies, I don't know if I really fit in, but I have been going through some trials and tribulations with DOES unemployment before and after the pandemic hit. They're just taking me through a lot of loops and holes, loops and holes to get money back pay that is due to me. They have had me file appeals. I've won appeals. I've had, my final order stating that, I could receive my benefits, and it still has been nothing. And I've been emailing everyone that I can email. I've even reached out to my council member of Ward 8. Emails have not been responded. It was one person that was responding back to me on a consistent basis, but she has now stopped responding. I had reached out to a lady named Miss Jackson, and was emailing her consistently back to back. And it wasn't until last week where she just finally responded back to me at 9 o'clock at night. I've called in several times where I'm on hold for maybe 4 hours, 4.5 hours, just to get through to speak to someone in regards to my claim, because I keep going from eligible to ineligible, back to eligible. Now I'm back to ineligible. So I don't know what is going on the back end with my situation, but it's just frustrating because people took the pandemic lightly. They People felt like they don't have bills to pay um because of the pandemic, but you still have to pay your bills. And I was solely relying on receiving unemployment, and I was disqualified for it. So just I don't know which way to go with it. I did speak to Miss Jackson last week. She asked me to give her 24 to 48 hours, which would have put her at Thursday, to respond back to me via phone or via email. And it is now Wednesday, and I haven't heard anything. I've called her supervisor and I've called her, and I have not gotten a response from anyone. And at this point, I even reached out to higher people and haven't received anything back as a response. And I even took it to where as though I went on the actual website and filled out the form for the Ask the Director, and told her about the situation, and still nothing.
Okay. Well, thanks, Ms. Young, for your testimony, and I will have some questions for you as well. Let me start. So we're going to do a 10-minute round of questions. So let me start with you, Mr. Hoffman. So you represent restaurant and hospitality workers. So give me the 3 biggest issues you are seeing from workers you represent right now.
I think initially the major issue were delays in traditional unemployment.
Mm-hmm.
Following that, now when PEUC is having some sort of multi-state work history. I spoke with the director of Nightlife and Culture yesterday, actually, at an event, and said that was, in his opinion, the most common issue that's running into people being denied claims. I understand that there is some sort of, Virginia is not apparently responding to DOES, and that's complicating issues. And I understand that that's, an interstate matter. But at the same time, that should not be something that is keeping people from the necessary benefits that they're getting.
Okay, let me stop you there. So we are hearing this a lot. We've certainly received a lot of these claims. And I believe another one of our witnesses, Ms. Hagner from the Legal Aid Society, we're going to talk more about this issue. But if I'm understanding you correctly, the issue is that a lot of our hospitality workers work in multiple states. So you have a job in the district, let's say you're a bartender in the district, and you also tend bar in Silver Spring. I think I gave that example in my opening comments. So and what happens is, let's say a majority of your wages are in the district, and so you apply for unemployment in the district. When your 26 weeks are exhausted, you apply for PEUC, and then you are told that you have out-of-state wages and you need to apply in Maryland. Is that what your workers are hearing?
That's essentially what's happening, but it is also important to remember that most of those cases I worked in Virginia 6 years ago, and it's coming up and flagging my account. Or it's not that I worked there last year, it's that, years ago, yes, I did work in Virginia, and that's holding up my account. So that's important as well. It's not necessarily a concurrent multi-state employment situation. It's a previous work history.
You have a previous work history in another state, but it's not in, and I'm going to use the technical term here, the base year that determines your unemployment claim. Okay. So for the workers who did work in multiple states in their base year, do you feel that the agency gives enough guidance and instructions to workers on what to do when they are told that they have a multi-state claim and they need to pursue unemployment in the other state they worked in?
No.
Oh, yes, Ms. Young, you are welcome to turn your camera on and join in the discussion. Thank you for being assertive. So you don't think there's enough? Okay.
No, there's not enough guidance with it. I'm dealing with that now. Being as it's an issue on my claim. They had sent me an eligibility monetary determination, and it was because they just told me to write a letter. Write a statement, send it to Sachs Finding, and just say that you want to combine your wages. So I follow their directions, and I did it. And it's like, now that I've said that I want to combine my out-of-state wages, which are Virginia wages, is and it decreased my amount that I would receive. And it also said that I made too much within a quarter of a year. It showed that I made just under 15,000. So that's now an issue on my claim now, and they just emailed me last night another monetary determination, and it's held me ineligible because of me trying to combine my Virginia wages. And when I did call to speak to someone, they actually said that they reached out to Virginia, and Virginia has yet to get back to them about it. I tried reaching out to Virginia myself to call just to see if it would be better for me to just file in Virginia and then come back to DC. And it's like, when you try to call, you get the automated person on the phone, and soon as it goes to the part where though you're trying to speak to a live person, it'll tell you that there's no one available, and the line hangs up. So
well, let me pause you there for a second, Ms. Young. We're going to use you as a case study and answer whatever you're willing to answer. I'm going to ask some basic questions. So do you work in the hospitality industry? Okay. What was your job?
Yeah. I was a concierge.
You were a concierge at a hotel or at a hotel?
No, at an apartment building.
At an apartment building. Okay. And you did this work in multiple places? So you had different jobs?
No. So I actually did the work in DC. It wasn't until I tried to file for my claim in DC that my Virginia wages came up, and that's what's holding up my claim.
So did you work in Virginia in 2019?
Yes.
In a different job?
Yes.
Okay, so you also worked in DC in 2019?
Yes.
Okay, so you are our prototypical case here. So you had wages in both states. You applied for unemployment and you were a W-2 worker in both of those places?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. So you applied for unemployment in DC, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and did you start receiving your benefits?
No, I was held ineligible.
Okay.
Yeah, I was held ineligible due to a situation on my claim prior that I had to eventually take to appeal. DLES told me that they mailed out things that I never received. I checked the mailbox every day.
Was this an identity issue, or did they
No,
do you mind telling us what the issue was?
I was wrongfully terminated from one of my jobs last year. Okay. And they said that the situation that happened 5 miles outside of work happened on the premises, and it didn't. So I've been having my issue with DOES since September of last year.
Okay, so they say that it wasn't a layoff. You went to OAH. Did you successfully appeal that claim, or are you still in that process?
So I successfully appealed one part of my claim because once that
Okay.
final order came back and, it was ruled in my favor to receive my back benefits.
Okay.
Now, all of a sudden, there's something else on my claim that now I have to appeal, and I'm waiting to be scheduled for that now, too.
Oh, this is a complicated issue. Okay. But you also have the combined wage claim.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious, when did that come into play? Oh, we might have lost your audio.
Mhm.
Oh, okay. We got you
To
back.
play.
Okay. So did you apply for
That
PUC?
they told me that I was unable to receive that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Ms. Young, I'm going to pause you there to get to Ms. Stempo for a second. So Ms. Stempo, you are work in the restaurant industry, if I remember correctly. You applied for traditional unemployment, and it took a while for that claim to process. Was there an issue on your claim at all? Were you aware of it?
No, it was just
Okay.
a wait. And it was a wait, and I was expecting a little bit of a wait because of the amount of people claiming at the same time.
Mhm.
Wasn't expecting like a 2.5 month wait.
Okay.
So
So it eventually processed, and then have you exhausted your 26 weeks of benefits?
yeah, that exhausted about 3 to 4 weeks ago.
Okay, and then did you apply for the pandemic emergency unemployment compensation?
Yeah, and then I applied for the pandemic, the PUC,
Mhm.
and I for it, and I was kind of, like I said, waiting for some sort of like email that was going to say, okay, now that you've applied for it, keep doing this or do this or some sort of steps, which there was no information. And then I waited a couple days, still nothing. And then, tried to reach out. Eventually, after like a couple of weeks of that, I got an email reply saying that I need to file the claims on my on unemployment.
Your weekly certification?
My weekly certification, that I need to continue filing those claims.
Mhm.
And then so I did that like immediately because I was like, oh, okay, well, it would have been nice to know that I continued to do that. I thought that I had exhausted. But so that was, and so then I went and did that, and then that they kind of gave me the back pay for that, but which was then my unemployment had been at like 270, and then after the PUC it went down $100. So
do you understand why?
no idea why, no communication or information about why that happened. It was just $300 less for the 3 weeks than it should have been.
Okay.
And then with my back pay that they gave me from my claim and in like March 26th to May 26th, so the 2 months, they only gave me back pay to May 6th originally. And like I was saying, right before this call, someone called me from DOES.
Okay.
And was like, it turns out, there's like 3 weeks of, which still isn't, because even from the time I claimed, it should be 5 weeks of back pay that DOES owes me. And they, sent me that like, they'll get it all filed today and out today.
Well, I'm running out of time. I unfortunately missed Stempo myself. But I am in a problem-solving mode here. So would you find it helpful if when you file for PUC, you got an email acknowledging receipt of that application and then instructions on what to do, like that you need to continue to file your weekly certification forms.
Yes, and the simpler the better. And all, like, just like keep filing your weekly, like in big bold, subject line.
Okay. Okay, that's a suggestion we'll make again. Thank you, Mr. Hoffman. So we had some real life examples of some of the issues you brought up. So, but to recap, so people are running into problems with PEUC with the first extension to traditional unemployment, both because they have combined wage, they actually did earn wages in their base period, and there's confusion about what to do. And then there are people, and I certainly can attest to this from those who've written to me, there are DOES informs them that they do have wages, but they did not work in the base period during that time. These are some of the things that I do hope to talk to Director Morse about next week. Help me out with any other, so we have PEUC is certainly a problematic area. And in terms of problem solving, it would be helpful. My understanding is people do now get an email when they're reaching their exhaustion of benefits that they need to apply for PEUC. So thank you, DOES, for doing that. But do you agree with Ms. Stumpo? It would be helpful to have acknowledgement of receipt of the PEUC claim and then instructions on what to do. Would that be helpful?
There is complete lack of guidance on the entire program, no matter what you're doing, when you are in the program or what's happening. Specifically, when you do face issues, there's really no guidance on how to interact with the unemployment departments of Maryland and Virginia. There's pretty much a attitude of go talk to them and come back to us. I had to very quickly become an unemployment expert, essentially, becoming someone who was unemployed in March. And there was no support system. There was no infographic. There was, I had to just kind of work my way through the system, look at some Facebook pages of friends of mine, seeing what they clicked and what happened and what made them ineligible or what they had issues or who had success, and kind of cross-reference everything. And there was none of that for people at the beginning of this entire crisis, and there's still nothing now. So there's very little guidance on how to do this properly, how to get everything in order, because there's quite a bit on the employer side or the employee side that you want to make sure you get all your ducks in a row and have your application ready to go, give them all the information they need and make sure it's accurate. There is some responsibility there, but there's very little guidance on how to be as proactive as possible on your end so that DOES can do their job as effectively and as quickly as possible.
I agree with you, Mr. Hoffman. As I said, we're going to have to move to the next panel soon, but I agree with you. I will put in a plug for our own website. So we have developed some materials, as you know, to help people, but we are going to develop some materials on PEUC because I will admit, even until I delved into this recently, didn't understand the complexity of, it's not simply an extension if you have wages in multiple states. It's a more complicated process that I think our claimants need help understanding. So I certainly agree with you there. I'm going to wrap up, but for one more minute, is there anything else with our hospitality workers? Any other? So we talked about sort of two big issues with the combined wages. Anything else that you can identify as a major obstacle for our hospitality workers in terms of collection of benefits?
Not a major obstacle, but one thing that I discovered, hi, this is Andrew Shapiro. One thing that I discovered that I don't think a lot of people know about, and I think this is particularly germane to part-time workers, is that, and maybe I'm incorrect in how I heard this, but if you are working and it's like week to week and some hours you have more than others, you should obviously keep filing. And if you make too much to qualify for that week, then that week goes on the back end, so you actually get that back. I don't know how that works with the extended benefits program or PUC, but I'm on extended benefits. I think,
I do want to ask you one thing, Mr. Shapiro, before we wrap
Yeah.
up, because you said there were 2 newsletters you found were incredibly helpful to you. What were those newsletters?
well, one was the actual DOES newsletter,
Okay.
which I've gotten twice. The other is Vince Gray's Ward 7 newsletters are like super useful, and they come out once a week. There's like lots of information in there. But I just wanted to make sure people know, or if I'm incorrect in stating this, that if people do make too much to qualify for a week, they should still qualify, and they ostensibly will get that week added onto the back end. So if people get back out of work, they haven't actually lost a week. And I had to find that out by calling in.
Okay.
But I think at this point, that would be very helpful to a lot of people, particularly those working part-time jobs.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Shapiro. And I want to thank all 4 of you. I wish we had more time, but we are going to have to move to our second panel. So thank you all very much for spending time with us this morning. We are going to move to the second panel, and that's going to consist of, let's see, it has Ms. Schiavone joined us. I do not see her here. Is Jamal Washington Robinson joining us? I do not see Mr. Washington. Margaret Holmes, is Miss Holmes here? Okay. Christian Clock, I see you, Christian. Thank you for joining us. Ryan O'Leary, do not see Mr. O'Leary here. And Drake Hagner, Supervising Attorney, Legal Aid Society of the District of Columbia. Great, I think those are all of our witnesses. We're just gonna have 2 panels today. So if our panel wants to turn their cameras on, we will begin with Christian Clock.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Oh, Mr. Clock, hang on one second. I think we're going to have a 4th member join you.
Great.
Hang on one sec. Okay, and our 4th panelist is going to be Trupti Patel, who is a commissioner in Ward 2. So Ms. Patel, you should join us as well. There you are. Wonderful. We have our second panel assembled. Mr. Clock, welcome, and you may begin.
Good morning, and thank you for listening. My name is Christian Clock. I am a circus performer and educator, and also a former Ward 2 resident who lived in DC for a decade. I have had the honor of performing at the Kennedy Center, producing a show at the Atlas Performing Arts Center, and teaching juggling in Capitol Hill schools. Last year, I was also privileged to perform as a juggler in the Metropolitan Opera's sold-out run of Akhenaten by Philip Glass. Most of my work is independent contracting. When I applied for PUA in late June, I received $779 in aid for the week ending April 11th, and an email that said there was no exact timetable for determination of my PUA eligibility. This message did not inform me that in order to receive PUA, I should continue filing for traditional unemployment. When the government doesn't explain this process, independent contractors like me have to tell ourselves our own story. And I told myself, wait. I mean, if you can't get an appointment at the DMV for 6 months in DC, I figured, why would my PUA determination come any sooner? Additionally, traditional unemployment operates on a week-to-week basis. If I'm waiting for my determination about my eligibility for 3 months of retroactive pandemic assistance, why would I continue filing weekly claims for for the traditional unemployment program that rejected me in the first place. PUA was designed to cover folks in the gig economy by looking at our history of hard work. Artists like myself might be in a 4,000 seat theater one day and an elementary school classroom the next. The number and variety of jobs we work to support ourselves is part of what makes being an artist so exciting. But in 2020, this respectable lifestyle has only felt like a hassle for the bureaucratic system. On the one hand, we were told to apply and get rejected from traditional unemployment, but on the other, we were expected to keep filing traditional claims as if it was possible to apply for 2 jobs per week in live entertainment. From my perspective, DOES expects those applying for unemployment to intuitively know the right path. And when we don't do the right thing, they believe that we were just confused or don't actually want the benefits badly enough. There should be no guesswork or uncertainty in this process. If the government has made requirements crystal clear for independent contractors like me, we would have jumped through every hoop you asked us to. And hoop diving is not even my circus specialty. Having these benefits means not worrying about purchasing technology that allows artists like me to operate safely and reach audiences virtually. Also not worrying about paying next month's rent, and not worrying about the substantial costs of pivoting in a year that has challenged everyone to reinvent themselves, their industries, and their marketing campaigns. Thank you very much for helping us resolve this issue. I especially want to thank Commissioner Trupti Patel for her advocacy on my behalf. I would not be here today if it weren't for her. And I look forward to remaining an ally to DC officials in supporting our local artists who have the incomparable power to inspire, educate, and uplift us in this unimaginable year. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. I appreciate you coming to testify. Next, we are going to have Ms. Margaret Holmes. Ms. Holmes, thank you for joining us. We need you just to turn your microphone on so we can hear.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Good morning.
Great. Good morning. I am one of those people like Christian who has been in hand-to-hand combat with DOES. And my struggle started at the end of March. But I want to first talk about a conversation I had with a administrator within DOES Tuesday night. I got a call about 6:00 p.m. My issue from the very beginning has been the monetary determination for self-employed, which I have run my own but as freelance transcriptionist for 40 years. So this gentleman from the very beginning of the phone conversation began to put me on the defensive, claiming that I was I was shouting at him, and he's trying to help me. And it was an attitude when I said, listen, a lot of us out here have been waiting for months. We're scared. I don't care about that, he said to me. It was the most unprofessional conversation I had. And this aligns with my belief as I went into this process from month to month to month, that at the very highest levels of DOES, there was a policy determination to not only discriminate, but to put aside the PUA claimants as a different class that they just weren't going to deal with. They gave us all the lowest rate and didn't look back. I have, on my part, want to talk about the Congress and how they, in their wisdom, saw that 50% of the workers in this country are either freelancers, part-timers, seasonal workers, people who run their own consulting businesses, construction businesses. The workforce has changed. Non-wage workers constitute 50% of our workforce. Yet DOES from the very beginning has just ignored what Congress said in the PUA Act we see on our claimant pages that there's a little menu item for 1099 forms. From the very beginning, they were supposed to upload those forms onto that menu. They did not. They then began a campaign of ignoring us and then didn't issue a monetary determination for 6 months. Without the monetary determination, you can't appeal. So they denied us our due process rights. DOES has decided that they are going to do this in the way that they're going to do this on their own time schedule. Forget about the people who need this money. It's something that I find astonishing. They have had ample time to set up a separate unit just to deal with the people, the self-employed, people who are applying on the PUA Act. 8 months they've had. Not only that, Congress and the PUA Act gave them the money, the administrative funds to set up, to hire extra workers to do this. DOES has done nothing. I have sent them 10 emails. I have made 22 calls. I have done all these things to try to get them to redetermine my monetary amount, my benefits. Now, in that conversation I alluded to, the gentleman finally turned me over to a very nice lady who said she was the head of the department that was processing the PUA claims. And she went ahead and processed my claims. And I'm very happy to report I received my back benefits from March today. But I'm thinking about all the people that had a chance to help us. I'm thinking about OAH, who I knew I couldn't appeal.
Ms. Holmes, I think your time is run out. I'm
Very
being
good.
generous today, but I will come back and ask you a few questions.
Very good.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Ms. Patel, good morning, and it looks like somebody is with you.
Yes, Councilwoman Elissa Silverman. This is actually one fair wage member, Hawani Jeladu. She actually tried to sign up to testify this morning and didn't realize that the Wilson building was closed. So she actually physically came all the way down from Virginia to speak to you. So I had her come over to my house so that she could speak to you.
Okay.
So I'm actually going to cede most of my time to her so that she could speak to you. So,
Okay.
all right, go ahead and talk to the councilwoman.
Hello, my name is Hawani. I work in Cafe Deluxe, Washington, D.C., Ward 2. And I have problem my extension for 13 weeks. I applied and when I called the lady told me I have to pick Virginia or DC wage. I told her I only work in DC. I want to keep in DC. And she told me I have to email fundingfactory.com. And I emailed them, they didn't reply. And Trupti helped me through you guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we emailed to the DC unemployment office, and the lady told me I'm not qualified because I work one day, our sister restaurant in Virginia, only one day. Because of that, she said I'm not qualified to get unemployment. DC has been 12 weeks. I always fill out my claim, but I don't get no response. She said I have to go to Virginia to do combined wage. That's my problem.
Thank you for your testimony. And do you have additional testimony, Commissioner Patel?
Yes, Councilwoman. So to echo my member Hawani's sentiments, I have run into, at least in the last week alone, 5 separate one fair wage members who have faced the exact same situation. If they have inadvertently worked for one day for one of their sister restaurants to do a favor for their bosses, they have now been told that they have to combine their wages and go into the state of Virginia. And oddly, Councilwoman, I'm facing that same issue. Right before I had disengaged from unemployment, I had filed for 1 week of PEUC, and I got the exact same email. We actually both got the exact same claims examiner. And the claims examiner basically sends like a form email, just changes the name and says the exact same thing. This is exactly what you need to do. And it's kind of shocking when, number one, 99.9% of my wages is similar to my former colleague, Hawani, that you've worked for one restaurant and you've pay your taxes, everything in DC, and yet they're asking you to go to Virginia. But then when people have tried to go into Virginia, done what DOES has asked, they've gotten no help and no assistance from the Virginia Department of Labor. And, my members and myself can't understand why more roadblocks and headaches are being created when we need to access these funds immediately. I mean, Hawani hasn't gotten paid in 12 weeks. I have several members who have not received one penny, and they've filed consistently every week for the last 12 weeks. I have a member who's losing his home housing due to this. Like, he can't afford his rent. He's moving out. I've had people say, I just simply can't do this anymore. I'm tired of fighting. I shouldn't have to fight to get benefits that I need to survive. People are exhausted. People are like, I'm tired. I don't want to keep calling DOES every day. And it's honestly, it's breaking my heart, Councilwoman. And, frankly, if your office wasn't there and if you weren't a champion for us, we would be out in the cold. We would have no recourse and no way to even have our voices amplified in this. So if there is any kind of way we can get a response from DOES as a whole to address this major issue, I think you would make a whole lot of people's Christmas happen, because they would be able to thrive. So thank you very, very much, as always, for your service, Councilwoman Silverman.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I'm just going to respond before we move to it. And I did put Ms. Hagner last because I think she is going to help address the process that I think is very well. Try to help us address the process. But let me say just a few things. I normally wait till my time, but I do think that our workers in this city need a champion. And it's not that the business owners, the restaurants who employ you don't need a champion as well. Obviously, but there needs to be a focus both on employers and employees who have been clobbered in this crisis. And I have been, I will say, asked why I've held several hearings on this issue. Frankly, I don't think we do enough. And I wish more of my colleagues were joining me in these hearings, because we have 160,000 people who filed for some type of unemployment assistance, whether they're like Ms. Holmes and Mr. Clock on PUA, or whether Ms. Yellowdew on more traditional unemployment. And about half of those workers are district residents. I think part of the issue is that we have a lot of Maryland and Virginia residents who claim unemployment, and they don't vote in our city. I'll just put it that way. But 80,000 of them do. And they have family members who do. And so the devastation by the pandemic, in my opinion, has been immense in certain parts of our city and for certain industries in our city. And then certain other industries, obviously, we've all been impacted tremendously, but not financially impacted, like people who are artists like Mr. Clock, or independent contractors whose court, I imagine, because the courts have slowed down, that's why you, Ms. Holmes, have lost your income. And certainly our hospitality workers have been impacted. So thank you for your comments. I will continue to be a champion. I did have a discussion with the director just yesterday about PEUC, and that is one of the things I hope that is why I hope she will speak to us about that, because I think we need clearer guidance on how workers can navigate that process. I am going to move to Ms. Hagner. Ms. Hagner, thank you for joining us. You have been an incredible resource for workers in our city and for our office, I will say. So thank you and your colleagues for all your hard work. Look forward to your testimony.
Good morning, Chairperson Silverman. It's a real pleasure to be here, and it is very moving to hear the testimony of the workers who came today. So I always begin my testimony by thanking the DOES employees who are working tirelessly, who are under-recognized, who have very difficult jobs right now and are trying to help as many people as they can. I think we have to thank our workers as well, who have been so tenacious, persistent, creative, resilient, and so many of them have come to testify or to share their stories with their neighbors, perhaps not with the council's knowledge, but we heard several people who testified today in a relatively small hearing became informal advocates for others. And that is what we have heard in the community, is that there are not enough lawyers, there are not enough DC government officials serving people. And so people have taken it upon themselves to educate themselves and help themselves and their neighbors and their coworkers. And I think that's very inspiring. I think it's, I'm sorry that we're in this position, that there's not enough professional helpers. But I think what we can learn is not just what we could do better in another economic downturn, or what we can do better in the next couple months, but we're also uncovering broader systemic problems with our unemployment compensation system that need reform in the coming years. This is, we have a short-term goal and we need to have a medium and a long-term goal. And I thank you and your committee for having some of those long-term goals in mind, legislating deadlines for how to get an RFP out to update our technology so that unemployment claimants at the next recession, which will inevitably come, whether it's 10 years or half a generation from now, that they are able to use modern technology and they are not locked out of the unemployment system because they don't have a home computer when the libraries are closed. So I'm sorry for the long-winded introduction, but I just was very moved by your comments and the comments testifying, the individuals testifying today. So, I mean, we are 18 days from the expiration of the CARES Act. This is an absolute point of crisis for many workers. We have many claimants who are homeless. We have at least a handful who are living out of their cars. And the winter is coming. Winter is coming. We desperately need every DC official to be pressuring the federal government and Congress. Mayor Bowser put forth a letter to the Biden administration. I fully support that. And I hope workers and as many people with influence as possible are pushing for an extension of those CARES Act programs. We are going to see 39,000 people with PUA lose those benefits the day after Christmas. We're going to see 37,000 people with PEUC who are going to lose PEUC. Hopefully they can transfer to extended benefits, but there's going to be money on the table of those 13 weeks that they haven't been able to exhaust. And one big question for DOES is, how is our city preparing for December 26th? What is happening to these new benefit program portals? What is happening to benefit claims that have not yet been processed? I'm getting panicked calls from claimants and I don't have the answers. I don't know what DOES's approach is to what happens at the very end of this year and in January. Well, we're in limbo waiting to see if our federal government will do its job. I have a lot more to say about PEUC. The workers who testified today spoke just absolutely very movingly and in detail about the flaws in some of the rules, the underlying rules and laws around designing the PEU system really disadvantage low and middle class workers in a big metropolitan area with other jurisdictions like Maryland and Virginia so close by. We have such a high cost of living. Our workers have to go to other jurisdictions to get part-time jobs, temporary jobs. We are more likely than ever to have workers cobbling together jobs from different jurisdictions. And what we've found through implementation of the PUC benefits is legal aid is getting flooded with calls, and it sounds like other people are as well, from people who are in purgatory, being told from DOES, we've withdrawn your PEUC claim because you need to go to Virginia or Maryland. But then they call Virginia and Maryland, and that state won't help them either. So we have to call on our leaders, the DOES director, any representatives who can help us. Let's be a leader in the DMV. Let's call together a weekly coordinating meeting between DOES, the Maryland Department of Labor, the Virginia Unemployment Office. Let's proactively resolve these claims and not just keep pushing the hot potato onto another state agency and blaming them for not getting back to us, because it's district workers who are suffering right now, who have been waiting 12 weeks, 13 weeks. We are seeing those same calls from people who just cannot break through this administrative burden and are stuck between two states. We have seen a lot of people with stories like Ms. Young, who I believe she said she worked only 4 hours in another state. I'm sorry, I don't have the workers' names on the tips of my fingers, but people who work one day, Ms. Hawani, who worked 1 day for a restaurant in Virginia. DOES has to let us know, what are the standard operating procedures for their PUC benefits team? There has to be some minimum amount of wages that they can use, some rule of thumb, maybe in consultation with Maryland and Virginia leaders to help them develop these standards so they can understand, is this a viable claim in Virginia or Maryland or not? Because we are seeing a lot of people coming to legal aid saying, I went to Virginia, they wouldn't let me file because I don't have enough wages. And now we escalated back to DOES, and DOES just repeats the same message over and over. They must go to Virginia. They must go to Virginia. If a lawyer is getting that type of message for our dozen clients who have this problem, I am terrified to know how many hundreds or thousands of people are stuck in limbo, not understanding the rules, not understanding how to break through. So we need to understand, how does DOES determine when someone needs to go to Maryland and Virginia? Is there a minimum amount of wages that could be a threshold rule where DOES can say, you know, according to our Virginia context, this is not a viable claim in Virginia. Yes, we see a very tiny amount of 6-year-old wages, but we know that the Virginia base period is not going to include those wages. And if we send this person to Virginia, they're going to get denied. So I think the DOES could be a leader in this problem, because I know other workers are having these problems in Maryland and Virginia and getting stuck with DOES. So this is a real nightmare. And I'm open to comments on that. I know I'm out of time. I'd be happy to speak to problems with PUA, just lifting up Mr. Clock, Ms. Holmes's concerns. We are seeing a lot of people who have not gotten their back benefits, people whose weekly benefit amounts who have not been adjusted. DOES has been erroneously telling people to submit proof of net wages from 2019, which is correct, but they've been improperly defining the term net wages in their standard emails. They've actually been requesting independent contractors to send net wages, not as it's defined in a Schedule C, which is revenue minus business expenses. That's how net wages works out for self-employed people. They've been asking people to submit net wages after paying taxes in 2019. That suppresses the weekly benefit amount for PUA, and it's plainly wrong. So we're seeing errors. We still don't have a PUA application or continuing claim forms in Amharic and many other languages. So we're seeing language access failures as well. I can speak to other problems. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today, and I look forward to continuing to work with many of the people on this call. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hegner. I muted myself. So given that we have workers who have real life issues, again, in this panel, I'm going to treat your cases like case studies. So if you don't mind, I'm going to turn to each of you and ask you maybe some specific details and really, I think, lift up what are these systemic issues at play. So let's start on PUA. So that is Pandemic Unemployment Assistance. This is a program that was created out of the pandemic and the Federal CARES Act to create a financial lifeline for non-traditional, or let's not call you guys non-traditional workers. You're very traditional in our economy now, but you have been ineligible for unemployment because you are not a W-2 worker. So I'm going to first turn to you, Mr. Clock. So you are a musician, I take it. You say you performed at the Kennedy Center and in schools. Is that correct?
I'm actually a professional juggler, so I work in circus art.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Not
that's
sure.
fine. No problem.
Okay, so you were impacted by the pandemic because all the places in which you perform shut down due to the public health emergency, correct?
Exactly. And I did a lot of corporate work. So like in hotels and big events, the convention center, anything was just gone.
Okay. And so you applied for traditional unemployment, as you should. You received notification that you were monetarily ineligible because you weren't a W-2 employee. Then you will file for PUA. Did you do that right when it was available at the end of April, or when did you?
No, I didn't do that until June. So that's another reason where I expected it to take longer, because I thought there's a huge backlog of claims. So I assumed just wait it out. And then it was the same thing that a lot of people have been saying. They're trying to rely on friends or online forums and all these other places that are not DOE's website, which should have all the clear information that we need.
Okay. And you applied in June, and when did you start receiving benefits?
I received a single payment for the week ending April 11th of $779, so the 600 plus the minimum. And I read in other places that that might be just a placeholder, and that later they would make an actual monetary determination. And I also thought it odd that I would just continue filing weekly and receive like 1 week of payment 2.5 months prior, like each week, and never actually catch up. That's kind of how it felt once I realized that I was supposed to keep filing.
Okay, so I guess in the interest of public education, so that is correct. So PUA did not exist before the pandemic. It was created out of the Federal CARES Act. And it is a perfect example of having to fly the plane while building it. So the US Department of Labor created regulations. The states, including our state of DC, had to implement. And the way that the program was implemented is that the Department of Labor instructed states to do an initial payment, which I believe was half of the median weekly unemployment benefit, which for the district was $179 a week. Then there was supposed to be, so sort of once everyone was enrolled, two things would happen. You would receive back pay because many PUA, the application wasn't even available, I think, till late April, though many workers like yourselves were impacted starting in mid-March when we shut down all kinds of places for unemployment, for the public health emergency. Excuse me for a second. So there was a back pay issue, and also, and I think Ms. Holmes, you mentioned this, a monetary redetermination issue, which is that under the regulations, and you can help me out here, Ms. Hagner, the state unemployment agency was supposed to do a monetary redetermination of your wage replacement, which I believe could be up to the weekly unemployment benefit, which in the district is $444 a week. And what PUA applicants needed to do was submit evidence of income to the agency, and they would review that and then make a monetary redetermination, which could increase your benefit from $179 to up to $444 a week. So that was a lot of explanation from me. I'm going to turn back to you, Mr. Clock. So you received one payment, which included the $600 supplemental from the CARES Act that ended in late July. Have you received any other payments since then?
The only payments I've received were since I reopened my traditional unemployment claim, which was in October, because that was when I realized, oh wait, like you are supposed to continue filing weekly unemployment claims on the traditional system.
So let me stop you there. So that's right. There's confusion. So under both UI and PUA, claimants have to file what's called a weekly certification form. Now, I will admit to you, and I think this has been frustrating from the agency, it doesn't make a lot of sense in the pandemic. I think you said this, Ms. Holmes, because if you're a restaurant worker or a court reporter and the courts are closed, it's not like you can look for another job. The point of the weekly certification is part of the traditional unemployment system that you are seeking work, which is a requirement generally of the unemployment program, but we've suspended the work search requirement at this time. So I will admit to you, the weekly certification, I think everyone agrees it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And I will take the agency's side here, which is this is a federal requirement that they have to comply with. So I think the agency is as frustrated as you are, Mr. Clark, as you are, Ms. Holmes, about that. The one thing I will say is that we have had, if you do not file your weekly certification form, your claim, that's an obstacle to your claim processing. You found that out the hard way, unfortunately, Mr. Clark. I wanted to ask you, like, how did you find out how PUA works? Clearly, there was a communication issue in that you didn't realize you had to file a your weekly certification form. So what, in a problem-solving mode, what would have been helpful for you to have known that?
For me, the initial email that said you have applied for PUA, which came for me, I think on June 30th, said we don't have a timetable on when we get back to you, but it said nothing about continuing to file weekly claims. And so that's where you're left just wheels spinning, looking for information. And then you have this random money show up in your account and you think maybe that means something, but it's a lot of guesswork that goes into it, and really hard to figure out, is there any determination? There's also no mention of pandemic unemployment assistance on the actual profile page of the DOS website. So that was also very confusing.
Okay, thank you. And then, so you have received 2 payments, but you have untangled, you're now filing your weekly certification forms. And
Correct.
Are you still receiving 170,
Yes, still 179 a week.
Okay, and you have not received any back pay from when you filed starting in
Correct.
June? Okay.
So yeah, I think the first week they paid me for was April 11th, which was also odd because I think I sent them evidence of work that I had lost as early as early March, because that's when all of the events started canceling. So that was immediately like $2,000 worth of work that just went poof.
So you have a back pay issue and a monetary redetermination issue, and sort of what is the latest status that you've gotten from the agency?
I have not received any information about my PUA eligibility, so it's really just the weekly claims that I'm filing and the fact that the money is coming in. That's kind of the only information that I feel like I have. Otherwise, it was talking to Trupti a little bit more about what all of this means.
Okay. And you have filed your income and earnings statements with the agency?
Yes, that's what I did in the initial application process. And that's another reason why I feel like when you do all of that and focus on the history, it's very strange to then turn it around and say, we need your weekly claims for the present day. It just doesn't, it seems like a totally different system.
I understand. It is a little bit. It is an appendage of the traditional UI system. As I said, there are a lot of federal regulations, U.S. Department of Labor regulations that DOES has to follow that I think we all admit don't make a lot of sense right now, but they need to be in compliance. Okay, Mr. Clark, we're going to follow up with you to the agency about your case. Now, Ms. Holmes, thank you for submitting your testimony. I read it. So you also, if I'm understanding correctly, are looking for a monetary redetermination. You submitted your earnings to fact finding at dc.gov, and also, oh, you did not. You did it with your initial application.
Yeah, this goes to what you've been talking about all along is the guidance
Right.
that DOES gives to people. I was feeling my way around in the dark. Some things I did just intuitively, like Christian, you stopped doing your weekly determination. I didn't stop. I don't know why, but I didn't. Immediately when I saw their initial monetary determination, I knew there was a problem because I knew that the act required that they use the 1099 forms or tax returns or whatever documentation to determine your weekly benefit amount. I'm afraid many claimants don't know this. They
Okay.
didn't know that the 179 that they weren't stuck with that. DOES sent no communication to anybody that they have a right to get more than $179. And I think it was masked by the fact that you got the 600, right? In the beginning. So, wow, you know, that's a lot of money. On August 1, when the 600 expired, see, I knew back in April when that 600 expired, then I would be left with the 179, and I knew that was the incorrect amount. But how do we get that message out, Tripti, to even your workers? They're probably eligible for more than 179, and they should be submitting documentation and staying on DOES.
So let me pause you there for a second, Ms. Holmes. So what money have you received from when did you apply for PUA? Did you apply?
March 20.
Oh, okay. So you applied for UI and were determined monetarily ineligible, or were you?
Yes.
Okay.
And that, right.
And then you applied for PUA when the application became available, because there was a lag of time, as I talked about.
Yes.
The CARES Act, passed in maybe early April, and they were able to get online in the application online in late April, I believe. Okay. So how many have you received any income from DOES?
The initial 179 plus 600, and then after August 1st, because Congress diddled around, we only then had 179, and I have been on DOES since April to redetermine my monetary determination. The other thing is people don't know that this is appealable to OAH, and DOES doesn't tell people that you don't have to be stuck with the 179. And I'm just so upset about the numbers of people in my profession all over this area that are just struggling.
So Ms. Hagner put a helpful note. So for our PUA claimants, if your 2019 earnings were higher than $1,560 a month, or about $19,000 a year, $18,729 to be specific, you would be entitled to more than $179 a week. So you would be eligible, depending on your income, for up to $444. So you're still waiting on your monetary redetermination, Ms. Holmes. That's correct. Oh, we just need to.
I'm sorry. No, I'm not. As I preface my statement, I finally got Tuesday. Finally, right. DOES determined, but this is after many months of agitation, lobbying, OAH. I even filed a complaint with the Inspector General's office.
I noticed that. Well, I'm glad that you got your funding, but once again, it shouldn't take signing up for a hearing or becoming an incredible. We're all advocates for ourselves, but we shouldn't have to go to extraordinary lengths like it sounds like you did. Now, I do want to turn to Hawani. How do I pronounce your last name?
Hold on, say it again.
Jaldu.
Jeldu. Jeldu. So Ms. Gildu, so you are an example of our combined wage claim case, but as I understand it, I think you told me you worked at a district restaurant, Daily Grill, and then you worked one day at a Daily Grill in Arlington, maybe, or in
Tyson Corner. It's a Cafe Deluxe.
Corner. Okay.
Cafe Deluxe, yeah.
Or I'm sorry, Cafe Deluxe.
Mhm.
And then, so you applied for unemployment. You're a W-2 employee. You received 26 weeks of benefits.
Yes, I did.
So you exhausted your traditional benefits. You applied for the pandemic emergency unemployment compensation. And then you were told by the agency that you have wages in Virginia. Is that correct?
Yes, they said I have wage, so I have to choose one, Virginia or DC. And the lady told me I have to pick one. I told her I want to keep DC. I didn't know this would happen. So I said, I don't want Virginia. And she told me to send email findingfactory.com. And I emailed them. They didn't reply still.
They didn't reply. Okay.
Yeah.
And is that where you are right now?
Yes.
Okay. How many, in 2019, how many days did you work in Virginia?
One day, that's it. One
day?
shift. One shift, yes. It's only one shift. Yes.
Okay. So then
the rest is DC, yeah.
The rest is DC.
Mhm.
Okay. 1 day of wages in Virginia.
Virginia,
So
yeah.
I'm going to turn to you for a second. If you have 1 day of wages in Virginia, would you qualify for unemployment in Virginia?
I have to give a bit of a lawyerly disclaimer, which is that I don't practice law in Virginia, and this is part of the problem. DOES needs to get guidance from the Virginia Unemployment Office about what kind of minimum wages in the base period, which here might be roughly 2019, but it would relate to Ms. Geldu's claim, what that period is. But they need to know what kind of minimum benefits are going to make someone eligible for Virginia UI or not. And if they can use that rule of thumb to satisfy the federal legal requirement, then we should all be fine. Because well, I can't speak to Ms. Geldu's situation. I can say that legal aid is representing multiple people who even have notices. We have people who don't have notices and people who do have notices from the state of Virginia or the state of Maryland, proving they are not eligible for a new benefit year there. And they're very similar facts to what Ms. Geldu is talking about. Maybe you worked there 3 weeks. Maybe you got a $300 one-time payment paying you out for sick leave or something, almost unrelated to work. Very minimum income often is not enough. You need to have some sort of out-of-state wages that allow that state to open up a new benefit year and then pull in, which is what we're talking about with a combined wage claim, then pull in any DC wages that were left over. And I won't get into how the wages get left over. It's a little complicated figuring out when's your base period and what wages are there and what ones are not. But this is a process that the states have to begin to cooperate with each other on, so that we don't have people just sitting in limbo in between these states, unable to break through the bureaucracy in either area. So what I tell my clients to do, what I'm helping people do, is we help people go to Virginia or go to Maryland, and we help them advocate for themselves to try and get a written notice. Call Virginia, say, DOES told me to file with you. I have tried to apply for PUC in DC. That claim was withdrawn by the unemployment agency. They told me I have to file with you. If I'm eligible in your state, can you let me know? And if I'm not eligible, I desperately need written proof of that. I need Virginia or Maryland to give me a document or enter a message. There is a database where these agencies can speak to each other about individual claims and wages. Send a message in that database. We generally call it the WIC database, W-I-C. Send a WIC message back to DOES. But I think what we're seeing is a complete overwhelm of the DOES team. That is my guess, that we saw PEUC start to roll in around mid-September. That was about the 26-week expiration period for workers, W-2 workers who lost wages due to the pandemic in mid-March. So thousands, I mean, we're talking like 38,000 PEUC claims started to trickle in a period of a couple weeks to a month or two. And I think DOES is just completely overwhelmed. And we need answers on how we can support DOES to shift resources to try and cut through this backlog as quickly as possible. And if possible, reassure the public, reassure claimants that DOES will continue to process this backlog even on December 27th, when the CARES Act has expired. Because, and they should do that, right? Because we're not talking about benefits that someone filed for January 5th. We're talking about benefits that someone filed for in mid-September onward. So the DOES work should not stop. We should keep shoveling away at that mountain of back claims for PEUC or other extension benefits. And we should communicate with the public better about what the barriers are, how to try and advocate yourself, and how to help our leaders advocate for everyone to get some better coordination.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Hagner. Ms. Geldu, when DOES told you that you had wages in Virginia, what instructions did they give you about how to file a Virginia claim?
Well, the lady said I have to call Virginia Unemployment and let them know I have combined wage, and to let them know like I'm not qualified for the 13 weeks. I have to do combined wage. That's what the lady said.
Did you understand why they were telling you to go to
Yeah, she said by Virginia law, even if you make $1, you qualify for combined wage. That's what she said. That's all she explained.
Okay, and what happened when you called Virginia?
They don't answer.
Okay.
DC, at least you hold 2-3 hours, they pick up their phone. Virginia, they just hung up. They keep saying call back.
Okay.
And they don't.
You haven't been able to get through to Virginia.
Nope. Yeah.
Okay. And have you
I
tried?
called different times, they don't answer.
Okay. Okay. I know that's frustrating.
Yeah.
We will try to work. This is the problem, as Ms. Hagner said. We only have I wish I could go in and adjudicate your claims myself, but I can't. And obviously we don't have oversight over Virginia's system, but as Ms. Hagner said, which I think is a good point, and I'm going to think further in problem solving that, we need to have a regional approach to unemployment and a regional approach to problem solving with PEUC, because we are seeing district workers having to deal with the Maryland and Virginia systems, as well as other states, to be honest. And so I'm sure, as Ms. Hagner said, there are many Maryland and Virginia workers who also work in DC who are now having to go to DC for their PEUC claim. They had an initial claim in another state. So this is a regional problem that we need to solve. Let's see, that might be all the questions I have. Are there any further points that anyone would like to make before we conclude? Ms. Commissioner Patel, we'll start with you. It looks like everybody, so we'll start with Commissioner.
And I mean, like I said, I think one of the big things I have noticed as I have talked to members over the last several weeks, and just other workers such as Mr. Clock, who reached out to me, unbeknownst to me, I was like, hey, I hear you can help me, so help me out, which, I have no problem doing. It's the fact that when a person does reach out to a DOES, the DOES agency, and gets an agent, the agents are giving out wrong information. They are actually being really kind of cruel and almost kind of very dismissive. My colleague Hawani wants to be really polite, but when she literally asked 3 different times, she would just basically say, I don't understand what you are telling me to do. I need you to help me understand this. And Rochelle Diggs' response, which, was I don't know any other way to explain this to you.
I'm going to stop you there, Mr. Patel. So I don't want to talk about individual workers. What I do want to talk about, I know people have some frustrating experiences. Some people have had some very good experiences too. And I, as many people know, I spent some of the summer in the unemployment office, and I know how much some of our workers, you know, painstakingly would explain the process. But the problem is we need clear guidance. There needs to be, when you apply for PUA, it should be clear to Mr. Clock that you need to keep filing your weekly benefits, and it should be told to you as well as sent in written guidance, so that if you're unclear why DOES is sending you this weekly certification form, that you could look at the instructions for PUA and clearly see you need to fill it out. So and with PUC, there's a communication failure here. There's a communication failure regionally, it sounds like, in that none of the state agencies have done a good job of explaining the extension to claimants. I will give you my impression, which is I thought PUC was simply an extension of unemployment benefits, so that if you are eligible for a claim, if you initially were eligible, then you'd be eligible for PUC. I didn't understand the combined wage issue. We have an issue with people who didn't work in other states in their base period being told they did. That's another issue, but there needs to be better communication. These are one of the things I want to talk to the agency about, as well as the really big looming issue about the CARES Act. In that I think a lot of workers don't realize that several programs expire on December 26th. I mentioned it at the beginning of my remarks. Ms. Hagner mentioned it again. But if there is not further action by Congress, several programs evaporate on December 26th. And the question is, what happens to people who are owed back pay through those programs? What happens if you never, so what programs will expire? Any of the federally funded programs through the CARE that were enabled in the CARES Act. So this is pandemic unemployment assistance, which, as we mentioned, impacts about one out of 4 workers right now, according to DOES. We have about 40,000 PUA claimants according to their numbers, and about half of our workers are district workers. So about 20,000 district residents are receiving PUA. Now, I do want to mention again, and this is part of the reason I believe the administration made this very good decision, and we want to talk to Director Morris Hughes about the stimulus that the mayor announced. So the mayor announced on Monday that PUA claimants who are district residents, so who both work and live in the district, who have applied for PUA by the end of November, will be eligible for a $1,200 one-time payment. And this is a lifeline. It will be a lifeline if nothing happens in Congress, because that money, PUA money, will end. So we do have a lot of questions, and these are one of the things that I wanted to speak to the director about. Then there is PUC, which is also enabled by the CARES Act. This is a special extension that was created through the CARES Act. So that money will also go away. And there's a question of what happens to workers who are owed PUC money. Then there's an issue with our extended benefits as well, and that the extension that we did on the 7 weeks is only applicable if it's fully federally funded. So we have a concern there as well. So there are a lot of concerns, but I interrupted. I think I'm going to give a chance for everyone to have some closing comments. So Ms. Holmes, and I'll ask you to keep those comments as brief as possible. We just need you to turn your microphone on so we can hear you.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I sure can.
I just wanted to close by thanking you very, very much for realizing that there are so many people out here that need information and need help in getting through this process. Someone mentioned that DOES was overwhelmed. So are we. But DOES doesn't have to worry about paying bills, getting evicted, their families, their children going hungry. And if we sound frustrated, if we sound angry, if we sound confused, if we sound, just not very understanding of the agency, you'll have to forgive us.
It's a stressful time. I understand that, Ms. Holmes, and thank you for sticking with it. And best wishes to you for the holidays.
You too.
Ms. Commissioner Patel and Ms. Geldu, any final thoughts?
I would like to say thank you so much
Sure.
for everything.
We will, as I said, we will try to help you get the information you need from Virginia, which it sounds like is that you would be, if the rules are such that you would be ineligible for UI in Virginia, given the minimum wages that you earned, and be eligible for PUC in DC. But we'll need to actually investigate that. So thank you for sticking with it, Ms. Geldu. I appreciate it. Thank you for coming to both of you. Mr. Clark, any final thoughts?
Yes, I would mostly like to emphasize that this is not going away, which I think you all recognize. Even in September, I lost $600 a week of work because there was an after-school program in DC that actually seemed promising and like it had signed kids up to do virtual programs. And then immediately, none of them signed up like they normally do because it's just a completely different situation. So I want to remind the council that artists are a huge part of creating accessible education in Washington, DC, and creating education that emphasizes STEM, the arts, culture, all of that. So we are having to really completely change our industry and re-educate ourselves in how to do virtual work that we didn't do before. So even when the pandemic ends, that's not going to go away. Our industry has really been fundamentally altered. And I also want to echo that I want to be an advocate for the arts community. And it is so exciting to do panels like this because we actually get useful information that we can take back to our communities. And even if it's not a promise of the money, it's a promise of something happening, which I know is going to be really tough in the next few months as we have our administration change. So I just hope that we can continue the lines of communication. And I just want to thank you and Commissioner Patel and everyone who participated for their input.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Ms. Hagner.
I'd like to share a 3-step checklist for anyone who thinks they still might be owed money, because there are 3 items to look out for where the clock is ticking. You have about 18 days to figure out if you can take any of these steps and if you might be owed more money. Number 1 is applying for PUA. I am convinced there are hundreds, if not thousands, of district workers who still don't know they might be eligible for PUA. That would be people who've been denied traditional unemployment or maybe never applied because they knew they'd be denied. People who are self-employed or contractors, and most importantly, people who are unavailable for work because of things like childcare centers, schools, or elder care facilities for family members being shut down due to COVID. So people who are unavailable for work can and should apply for PUA. The request to increase your weekly benefit amount, and that's for all workers who think they've earned about $19,000 or more in calendar year 2019, you need to get that request in the next 18 days. So apply for PUA, share the news with your family and friends who might be eligible, and ask for more in your weekly benefit amount if you've earned more than $19,000. That's item number 1. I'm sorry, that's a long one for item number 1. Checkbox number 2 to look out for is people who have not gotten back weeks of benefits because they were unable to file a weekly continuing claim form. That could be people like Mr. Clock, who, since all the weekly claim forms are called UI and he was applying for PUA, he didn't know that this was also the PUA form. So it may be people who just didn't understand the system A lot of people were unable to file because they are only able to file by phone and they didn't have cell phone minutes to wait 3-4 hours on hold every week. There are lots of folks who haven't put in back week forms. Please do that before the end of the year or call legal aid for help. And finally, the last checklist, if you know workers who've been denied weeks or months of benefits because DOES claims you failed to respond to an email requesting more information, please call legal aid. Please file an appeal with OAH. Our number is 202-628-1161. These are cases with a high likelihood of success, let's just put it that way, to get you back benefits that you believe you were denied. If you never got that email in the first place, if you don't have good computer access, if the email wasn't sent in your language, or you just didn't understand how it related to your claim and how to respond. So those are 3 time-sensitive check items. I'm trying to spread the word. Legal Aid has some flyers as well. We'll post those to our Twitter later today and on our website in case that's helpful to people. And then of course, we're available to help as many low-wage workers as possible. So thank you so much for the opportunity to testify and keep these conversations going.
Thank you, Ms. Hagner, for all those helpful tips. And I want to thank our prior panel as well for really helping this committee and my colleagues on the council really understand the challenges you are facing. I saw, Ms. Holmes, you look like you were holding back emotions, strong emotions, and that's completely understandable. This is an incredibly difficult time for our workers in industries like yours. And I think it's important for those who don't work in your industries to see the impact that the pandemic has had on your lives. And I will tell you, every day I think about workers in the entertainment industry, the hospitality industry, the hotel industry. I'm going to think about our court reporters even more, Ms. Holmes, now that you've testified, and think that, I know that we're trying to do everything we can to help you stay afloat at this time. And I know it's been a challenge. I do want to take a moment to thank the workers at the Department of Employment Services. As I mentioned, I had a on-the-ground view for a few months of the dedication of many of these workers who are dealing with outdated systems and complicated rules. And, I know that some people have had frustrating experiences. I can tell you, I remember hearing phone calls with workers who would just spend every minute necessary to explain these very complicated rules and programs. But that gets to, I think, some of the big takeaways again from the hearing is we have to work better on communications and making these very complicated programs understandable to our workers. As Ms. Hagner said, we need to make it understandable. You got to fill out your weekly certification form, no matter if you're a UI or PUA claimant, and that if you don't fill it out, your claim can't move forward. We need to explain PEUC better and the extension programs better, especially for those who work in multiple states, who work in Maryland and Virginia, as well as DC. And we need to do better advocacy to Congress because we need federal money to continue to keep our workers afloat. That can't happen at the state level. I do want to thank Mayor Bowser and Director Morris Hughes for the $1,200 stimulus that will help probably one out of four of our district workers, district residents who are on unemployment. But we need help for all of our workers, for the 80,000 district residents on unemployment and those who work in the city but live elsewhere. We need federal assistance. We need continued PUA. We need continued UI. We need additional money like we saw in the CARES Act to supplement the unemployment payment. So I hope that will happen soon. Finally, as a reminder, the committee will accept written testimony for the record or through voicemail until Wednesday, December 23rd at 5 p.m. You can submit the written testimony by emailing labor@dccouncil.us or call 202-455-0153 to leave a voicemail of your testimony that we will transcribe. As I mentioned at the top of the hearing, we have been working with the Department of Employment Services Director to have her testify. I hope we will be able to announce a date very soon. We are looking to next week for the director to talk about the PUA stimulus payment, to talk about PEUC and clarifying procedures, and third, to talk about what happens if there is not renewal of the CARES Act or a new bill in Congress that would continue the federally funded programs in the CARES Act. So very important issues. It's going to be a very important conversation. But there being no further business today, I am going to conclude this roundtable on unemployment compensation right now. And I want to thank you all again for your participation.